What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Okay, today I have two very special guests. We have Mr. Anthony DeLorenzo, who is a humanities professor, if I'm not mistaken, and has a background in history. I have the great OG, Mr. Ryan Wood, with a background in aerospace engineering, and he wrote one of the quintessential books about crash retrievals called Majic Eyes Only, and he's also the son of the late great Dr. Robert Wood, who I was very sorry to hear about his passing because I really wanted to talk to him, but I wanted to talk to both of you. So thank you so much for being here, you two. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us, Pavel.
All right,
Yeah.
so I've been speaking to Anthony for a little bit, and I want to thank both of you for sending me this book, UFOs, Who Knows? I'm going to leave links in the description so people can check it out. I always find myself doing like compilations of the latest statements of people talking about UFOs and the credibility they have. And when I got this book, I didn't really know what it was about, but then I started reading it and I was like, okay, so this is like the go-to now piece that everybody should have so you can find out about history of ufology and people who have either had any type of sightings or and yeah, their credentials, because you guys section it. How did you guys come up with this sectioning of the book? I'm gonna ask first Anthony so he can tell me.
Yeah, Ryan and I just brainstormed and discussed different options. We were thinking maybe we go with the juiciest quotes in a certain section, but we ultimately just decided it would be best if it was different by category. And
Right.
we just went with that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we thought leading with astronauts, everybody likes astronauts. It's sort of neutral but powerful. And so that was sort of to get people going. And I think we went to celebrities next because people want to relate to different people. Everybody's got, I don't trust astronauts at all, but boy, if Shaq tells me something about UFOs, I listen, so that was one of the reasons why we chose to do these categories.
It is kind of weird that if just one of these major celebrities decided to get more involved in the topic, how much the attention would shift towards the topic, and nobody really does it. Do you guys have any like theories on why this happens? Because if I was one of those big celebrities, I would instantly just start talking about this and use my platform.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and I think some have. It's uh, in the history back 10 years, 20 years or something, it was pretty much poo-pooed and it wasn't mainstream and so forth. But now it's far more, drones are in the news, UAPs, and there's a far greater buzz with the politics and so forth. So I think it's more acceptable now, but I'd love to get Taylor Swift to tell everybody that MJ12 is real or something, or share her experience. Um, but it's surprising how many celebrities have had experiences.
What about you, Anthony? What do you think? What's your theory on why they don't really come forward that much? The big ones, you know.
Yeah. No, Pavel, I think that's actually a really great question. And I don't know, I don't really have a theory, but I would start to then, my questions would start to be, is it because there's a line that you don't want to cross? Really advocating for this and just even going off the facts, David Grush and all the other stuff from recently and the hearings and so forth. The hearings didn't happen for over 50 years. So you would think, like you said, just one person would come forward. And I do agree with you, it would probably shift a lot of attention. So why do they not? I mean, it's a great question. We would like to find out. One of the things that we want to do is actually reach out to bigger celebrities and see if they'll give a new quote for continuing to update the book.
We just
Right.
saw Logan Paul recently did some really major quotes on that. And I wonder if like for volume two, maybe you guys can get him to say something here. But I hear that he got even involved with some of the efforts. But Anthony, I'm gonna stay with you a little bit because you said you have I've heard you say that you have a background in history. Um, has your interest in UFOs been long since you were young, or when did it start?
Yeah, when I started studying it more seriously, probably was about 2020.
Okay.
And but I was always into so many different subjects, and it was just kind of funny because I was always open-minded to different things, especially government cover-ups in particular, because I did a high school history project once, and I realized, of a cover-up from like a FOIA document that year, and I was like, oh, okay, so the government really lies about stuff and covers it up. But the UFO topic never really came on my radar seriously until 2020, just by chance. I heard the 2017 in the New York Times and all that, so it started to get on our radar more. Us, I think, in the younger generation, the older or previous generations have been on this subject for decades and have done so much great work. So it was just such a great learning experience for me to start diving into all that stuff. So it's been about the last 4 years, 5 years that I've been studying it, but I was always open-minded to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Wood, um, because you are like part of the OG crew, and
Yeah.
I know that there was a massive shift in 2017, and I just want to get your perspective. How did you guys live through that? Because you had been like at it for decades, and then suddenly everything just jump starts and takes
Yeah.
another
Well,
gear.
sort of answering your first question you posed to Anthony, and then coming back to what you highlighted. I have been exposed to ufology when I was started at 15 in 1966 or something, with my father coming home and talking about gravity control at Douglas Aircraft Company, and some of the old guard, Stan Friedman, etc. And then we sort of specialized in UFO documents in earnest starting in 1994. And then I was frustrated with the Mutual UFO Network conferences in the 90s, and decided I can do a better job than this, and started the UFO Crash Retrieval conferences. So from '03 to '08 or so, I ran 7 UFO Crash Retrieval conferences in Las Vegas. And that was 18 years before Grush showed up and said, "Oh yeah, there really are ones." There really, and it was highly validating. But we were way ahead, and we had George Knapp and George Norrie and Linda Moulton Howe and all, Redfern and Dolan and all the people that you see on Ancient Aliens and other programs now were all there giving talks, and we were still out in the weeds. Um, but yeah, in things got for me, I just sort of re-engaged into ufology last year because my kids are all going off to college, and I could now spend more time at it. And that's when I decided to update my book, Majic Eyes Only, and also to partner with um, Anthony to go, pull in some new young blood and, work on Who Knows, which was my attempt at um, solving the fundamental problems of ufology, which are credibility, leadership, and money. I mean, and this is the attempt at credibility, is when you see all these quotes from these very accomplished, incredible people, you go, wow, that's really kind of amazing. And that allows you to take a more serious tone with the topic.
And particularly like the sections of the scientists and the potentially hostile people who are not for the topic. I found it really interesting that you guys also included those, because there's Dick Cheney there, and potentially Dick Cheney is one of the main gatekeepers. So what was that process like, and did you guys even reach out to any of those by any chance?
Well, we reached out to a few people, but we're mostly trying to reach out to new celebrities and so forth. Um, but it was really about compiling the existing data. And Anthony did a great job working on a lot of the religious leaders and and celebrities as well. And we just felt that it was all scattered in the history of ufology, but putting it together in a single book was a sweet approach.
Are you religious, any of you, Anthony?
I'm not religious, but
No.
I'm just sort of open-minded to.
And you reached out to religious leaders. So what was that like? Because I know that there's a contingent of people, for example, the Collins elite, who think this is something spiritual or supernatural. And I'll talk about that. I'll get into that more in a second, but I want to ask you, what was that experience like, reaching out to them? What you found out about them? What did you learn?
Yeah, so I didn't actually reach out to any of the religious leaders we included in the book. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I would say the almost all of the quotes are in the public domain. We just located them down, sourced them, so you could go look at them yourself and put them there, except for Ryan's dad, and Dr. Wood gave a personal statement to you for the book, right, Ryan?
Right. Yeah, he did. Um, and and we're sending off copies to a few of the people that have quotes and see if they're going to want to update their quotes and solicit more. So it was really a compendium and a synthesis of it's the preponderance of these quotes that has the impact. Um, it,
Okay. And I want to ask both of you, have you ever had any sightings, encounters, anything of the sort that you can share?
um, you want to go first, Anthony, or you want me to go?
Yeah, I could go first. To your last question, Pavel, about religious putting together the religious leaders, I just wanted to briefly comment.
Yeah.
I did speak with, and his name is Reverend Michael Carter. And
Okay.
actually, I recommend that you speak with him. He's been on Ancient Aliens a few times and some at some UFO conferences, which is where I met him. Was at a UFO conference at a library in Connecticut that they do. They've been doing every year for a long time. So he has a very interesting perspective. He's a universalist, Unitarian minister. So, and people can look up what that is, but basically, it just kind of acknowledges all the different faiths. And so he gave us a statement, but actually didn't make it into the book. So that's the only person in the religious realm that I kind of spoke with personally. But if you read through them, and you were talking about like the Collins elite and maybe some religious views that might be at odds with the idea of other beings from other worlds, however we want to conceptualize it. But that was one thing we found was consistent through all of the religious leaders is they all said, our religion allows for this to be part of reality. There's nothing wrong with it. So that
Yeah.
was interesting.
What does
Yeah.
get to me a little bit when you're talking about this religion is that I found that a lot of these people that do believe this is supernatural, they
Mm.
also rely a lot on the ancient scripture and this prophecy aspect of the whole thing. And that weirds me out quite a bit. So whenever I approach it, I don't know, maybe it's fear that I feel. It's possible that it's that, but it does get into it does get me a bit when they start talking about that. But yeah, let's go on with your sighting, Anthony, and then Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Pavel, I'm just because I want to keep it brief and keep passing it around. Do you want the night sighting or the daytime sighting?
I want the one that startled you or surprised you the most. That's what I want.
That's a good question. I would say that they were both kind of equal in that
Okay.
kind of experience. But yeah, I saw I was out camping with friends and we were in the Adirondack Mountains and this was in like 2019. We were in a very remote area on a mountaintop. So like imagine you're looking out and all you see is just wilderness. There's no lights. There's nothing for as far as your eye could see in the horizon. And we're out there actually pretty much all day. Then it starts to get to like dusk, just after sunset, and I see something that looks like a star, but it's still light out. And I'm like with three of my friends, and I'm like, "Is that a star already? You guys see that?" And and then my friend's like, "Oh, it's moving closer to us," which didn't register in my visual field for some reason. And then I'm like, "Oh, you're right. It is moving closer to us." And then it just was in the valley below us, and it just hovered there. It was an orb, as would be described like a star-colored, very bright orb. Um, and it hovered in the middle of the valley, and we were just looking at it. And I kept trying to get my friends to give me some kind of rational explanation of what it was. And I felt a little bit sketched out because we were a day 2 days hike from where we parked. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so
Damn.
I'm starting to get like, this thing is like kind of looking at us. And then we're watching it, right? And we're all just like, damn, probably maybe 5, 10 minutes. And then it just instantly disappeared. Like it didn't
Like,
fly away or anything. It just vanished.
okay, okay,
The light just went out. And then when we looked where the light was, there was no object there. It's kind
okay.
of
Whoa. Yeah, I would have shut my pants too. Um, okay. Thank you. What about you, Mr. Wood?
Well, the only real case that I remember, I was driving back from college in Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California, and driving down Highway 101 near Vandenberg Air Force Base, um, where I saw sort of a light in the sky that seemed odd and colored and so forth. So I pulled my car over, got the binoculars out of the trunk, stared at it for a little bit. It zigzagged around and then sort of disappeared. Um, and I put everything away, drove home. Filled out a MUFON uh, report that's somewhere in their files for this particular event. So nothing really weird. I mean, Vandenberg Air Force Base launches satellites into polar orbit and has a lot of classified programs. So um, I don't know if it's one of ours or one of the ETs or whatever, but that was my extent of my experience. Um, Most of my life has been as an analyst and an investigator in documents and UFO crashes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. In the book, the section about precedents, that one is really interesting to me because you can tell how they have been treated. And I've heard precedents being referred to as temporary employees by, you know, the lore calls them that. And there's a recent report from Geoff Cruikshank, an Australian researcher, who talks about the bluegill triple prime nuclear test. And there was an object that fell from that test. And it's a recent article where he basically confirms that Mr. Harold Malmgren, who was one of the advisors of Kennedy, um, he got briefed on that crash because it was a crash. I was wondering if you knew anything about that one because Malmgren did confirm that he was briefed and he was taken to Los Alamos. And then he also said that President Kennedy was briefed about it. So that's the first time I hear somebody that high talking about Kennedy being briefed about UFOs. And there's a lot of lore surrounding that and how he was probably assassinated because of that. What is your take on that?
Yeah, well, there's lots of reasons why he could have been assassinated, and adding um, the fact that he wanted to tell the Russians what the unknowns were, which is in one of the leaked Majestic documents, um, is another reason. But I think in one of the earlier Majestic documents, um, Kennedy was briefed because he was in Congress, and one of his friends in the military told him about it before he became president, and that's where Kennedy, I think, first got the clue, oh my God, this could be really important and real. And he just experienced the Bay of Pigs, and um, I think he was sick and tired of it. He said, "Well, I don't want to have another knockdown, drag out fight with the Russians. Let's just go tell them the truth about the UFOs, and so we don't shoot each other um, inadvertently." And the James Webb, the head of NASA at the time, said, "Well, that was the memo was written to him at the time, and I don't know what happened, but that could have been one amongst many reasons why um, he was assassinated. And then there's also on the majesticdocuments.com website, there's the burned memos. These are original onion skin paper that are slightly burnt, um, pulled from the fire allegedly, which talk about the um, assassination of Lancer, which is the code name for JFK. Um, I think it says if the situation is uncooperative, we should make it wet, which is a code word for assassination. Um,
Yeah.
so
Damn.
that's sort of my monologue on Kennedy and JFK and the assassination and his involvement with the Majestic documents.
And Anthony, you were the one who was compiling all of the quotes from presidents. Is
The
that
president's
correct?
the president's section, Ryan had, I want to say, yeah, maybe I had a handful. And
Yeah,
so when the presidents, I did do the rest, and that was a very interesting thing to really find exactly what they said and where they said it, and then to transcribe it into the quotes. Yeah.
Who
yeah.
do you guys think is the one that has the most revelatory quote out of all the presidents about UFOs? Because I got one for you that I'm gonna share,
Okay.
but this one is kind of a little secret. But which one would you pick?
Well, I guess what caught my eye with all the presidents was their subtle acknowledgement that something is going on, but their delicateness with which they respond so well, so wordsmith in their response. And I think of Obama as an example of that um, subtlety. Um, and I think he said, well, I had to get the quote. Obama, page 171. Is that the one you're going to choose? Um,
No.
so okay, so Jimmy Kimmel is interviewing him on TV. Um, did you look for the secret UFO information? That's the first thing I would do. And Obama signs, the aliens won't let it happen. And I think he's telling the
Yeah.
truth.
And yeah, and people should watch that because the face he makes is it's interesting, to
Yeah.
perceive it as you will, but it's pretty interesting.
Uh, wouldn't you reveal all their secrets? Um, they exercise strict control over us. And so I think that's true. Uh, and,
That is
and the question
wild.
is,
That is
yeah,
wild.
It is wild. And
yeah,
they laugh, but like I swear, I feel like Obama was being serious, but maybe not. But
yeah. And the question is, what is strict control? Um, do they care about the economics of the world? No. Do they care about whether or not you launch nukes at each other? Yes. Um, do they care about whether or not you've got gravity control vehicles that are going to upset um, the world powers? Maybe. So it's this delicate dance of, how do you control planet Earth? Um, there's what, 8 billion people on planet Earth, and you certainly don't control all them. You just control a certain subset that has leverage over everybody else somehow. So maybe the various world leaders um, or power structures or oligarchs, or, you know, does Elon Musk has an ET implant in him? I don't know. Um, but I wouldn't say that's unreasonable.
Yeah. There's this quote that I've been speaking to a source of mine that had some level of access with the kids of presidents. Um,
Oh,
and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I checked on this guy's credentials and he has pictures with some of these kids. Um, Allegedly, Bill Clinton usually tells the people that he's hanging out with at parties and stuff, and he says, the craft we have encountered is not inconsistent with interplanetary travel.
hmm.
And allegedly, if you say this quote to some of these kids, they will like get startled. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I did tweet it because when I found out about it, I was like, can I tweet that? Because that seems interesting. He's like, yeah, just don't quote me or anything, but yeah, you can tweet it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
weird.
Well,
That's
the
a
Clinton
yeah,
definitely has been, I mean, he was the guy who put one of his friends over at the Justice Department and said, "There's two things I want you to find out. Who killed JFK and are there UFOs?" And um, I don't think he succeeded either, but
no,
that was the mission.
yeah. And also there's that story about Nixon and this comedian. What was his name? That
Jackie Gleason.
yeah, that and I'm
Yeah.
sure you included Jackie in the
Yeah.
book. So
Yeah.
that's also very interesting because this means that presidents who were briefed about it were talking to their pals during like dinners and parties, maybe a little bit drunk and just got their tongue a little loose. And there are a lot of stories like that.
Right.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
Jackie Gleason said, these are definitely not objects made on our planet. They weren't secret weapons, but they're a solid craft. Uh, that's kind of blasé compared to some of the other more detailed interviews and accounts that have been written up about Jackie Gleason and Richard Nixon. Um,
Yeah. Do you think he maybe took Jackie to an actual UFO as the legend
I, you
says?
know, I, I the evidence is certainly, why would you? Um,
Lie about
I think
that.
this comes from his wife. Um, that Jackie Gleason told his wife about this, and people interviewed his wife.
Yeah.
And I think Peter Robbins interviewed the wife, and people have written it up. So wives don't make up shit.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna have to move on to crash retrievals a little bit. Because you wrote Majic Eyes Only, which I already said it's the quintessential book of crash retrievals, in my opinion. I want to ask you about the Koyama crash, and also Gerb says hi because I've been
Oh,
talking to Gerb.
oh, good.
Um, yeah, he
Yeah,
says hi.
yeah. He's great.
I I have been following a lead in that specific crash, but one of the person that told me about this is not really that reliable. So I wanted to ask you specifically in your investigation of Koyame. We know the story that some of the soldiers from the Mexican side were dead on arrival, and the CIA was somehow involved in the whole incident. But I heard from this source that I have that is not very reliable that he has a witness who is very old and has some kind of footage
Mm,
about like the aftermath. Have you ever heard
wow.
anything about this?
No, no, I
Uh,
haven't. But I believe that not only myself, but Ruben Iliarte and Noe Torres have done some work on this case as well. Um, Magic Eyes Only is a synthesis and compendium of 104 UFO crashes from around the world. And it's all referenced in footnotes. And I'm not the lead investigator on every crash. Um, by any means. And pull together the various people to explain and talk about and synthesize their event into this compendium. And my goal, again, like UFOs Who Knows, is to offer a preponderance of the evidence that anybody that's logical walk away, well, all these people aren't lying and all these crashes aren't bogus. It only takes a few to walk away with the reality that it's real.
Yeah. And well, if you guys haven't seen yesterday, Ross Coulthard just came out with a new story about a crash retrieval whistleblower. His name is Jake Barber. And he claims that they're going to show a video of one of these crash retrievals on Saturday.
Wow.
So depending on what happens there, because, it's only healthy to be skeptical about everything. If you're respectful, you can still be skeptical and ask questions, I think. If you guys could give me your initial reaction to, bless you. If you guys could give me your initial reaction to this potentially groundbreaking story, let's start with Anthony first.
Sure. Pavel, can I quickly share the president before I
Yes,
answer that? It'll
of
segue, I
course.
think, into it because I love the question, and that you could pick any, but I think Harry Truman's is really interesting because he was president from 1945 to 53, so he was there in 47 with Roswell and all that stuff. And I had to dig to find this, but he really did say this, and he said, "We discussed UFOs at every conference we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report. I don't have anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on, flying saucers, and they've had other things."
What
And I
other
think that kind of,
things?
yeah. I think it kind of just is one other example of how, this has been going on for 80 years, just about. And so, yeah, I think it's good. I'm looking to see what the details are for the Jake Barber. And I believe it's Saturday night. They're going to release the interview, right? And it's Ross Coulthard, it's News Nation. So we know that's where the David Grush interview came from. So I'm assuming Ross Coulthard did all that vetting and that this whistleblower submitted things to agencies through the process like David Grush did. I'm going to be looking to see if that's what they did. And the video of a crash retrieval, yeah, I mean, sounds fascinating. I'm assuming they're going to show it Saturday night, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be great. And who is the person that you mentioned, Pavel, that did the original investigation that gave it to Coulthard? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
What do you mean? I said that?
Yeah, you mentioned somebody earlier.
Was this from us talking yesterday, Ryan? Was it Jesse Michaels? There's another whistleblower.
No.
That wasn't it. It was Christensen or yeah.
No, I don't recall. I think Ross has been working on this for 2 years. That's what he said. And there has been a lot of chatter on Reddit and on Twitter. And there was a Reddit post that was very specific and detailed about, because I'm just gonna come clean to you guys. My main investigation on Psicoactivo has to do with psi abilities, because I got that's the only proof that I have about anomalous things being real, because I've experienced some really weird shit when I was younger that I am still trying to explain how that happened. And Ross, last year, before when he teased this story, he talked about how psionic abilities have been sort of mapped out throughout the world, and they have recruited people with these abilities. And my main case has to do with a doctor, a Mexican doctor, Jacobo Greenberg, who disappeared in 1994. And he was the leading investigator on psi abilities in Mexico. And he mysteriously disappeared. They still haven't found him since 1994. And Ross talked about scientists working against their will, training these kids with psi abilities. So that's the angle that I am trying to take on this. Obviously, I'm going to report on the whole crash retrieval stuff because it's fascinating and very interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to find out more about that
Well,
specific.
you're probably familiar with the work of the remote viewers and the Project Grill Frame and Stargate
Yep.
and SRA International's efforts on remote viewing with Pat Price and Ingo Swann and all those
Andrea
folks.
Pujarik.
Yep, and Russell Targ I mean the guy who's written the best book to my knowledge on this topic is Dean Radin.
Yeah.
And you can find
Dean
his
actually was, when he was doing his PhD, he met Jacobo back
oh,
then. And I've been trying to speak to him, but it's kind of hard to reach him. I found it really odd that when I ask about Jacobo to the people that I know may know something, they deviate from the question and talk about something else, and it's really weird. And I found photographic evidence of Jacobo hanging out with John Keel, with Jack Valet, with Andrea Pujarik. There's a lot of evidence of that. So
Was there something that he specialized in?
I'm sorry.
Particularly? Was there something that he specialized in, like in the psi
Yeah, he
research?
specialized in eyeless sight, and he was doing an experiment in 1994 that it's called the transfer potential. He wrote a scientific paper with Dr. Amit Goswami from India, and he was trying to prove the Einstein Podolsky Rosen bridge that talks about quantum entanglement. But he was doing experiments between people and between human minds, and he proved it inside the same building. But when he wanted to go to India and use satellite technology to connect minds with satellite between countries, and when he was about to take the plane, he disappeared.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
that's another mystery.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of it. But certainly, psi ability and understanding the nature of psi and psychokinesis, precognition and psychokinesis is something to do with the quantum entanglement, the 0 point fluctuation, gravity control. I mean, it is one of the key aspects of UFO propulsion breakthroughs in my mind.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I also feel like historically there's been also some type of suppression of these abilities in people because for me, for example, all of these ethnic cleansings that have happened throughout history, I think they're also related to that. And there's a heavy religious connotation to it because if you guys have read up on it, the Holy Inquisition was partly about that. Whenever they found someone who not just thought differently, but had different practices that had nothing to do with religion, they would kill them. And I think it's related to that too.
Yeah, I think of the Salem witch trials right away.
Yeah.
If you got that sort of power or and that was too scary for people. People that can do precognition or even just know what you're thinking in the next few minutes is frightening to people.
Yeah, and the bigger bulk of Jacobo's work in reality is about shamans. He was the scientist who studied shamans the most in history. He wrote like 4 or 5 books about them. And I think that work, and it's funny because I also found some evidence of Pujarik visiting Mexico and visiting the most famous shaman, Pachita. And Jacobo wrote a whole book about it. And they even met at the presidential palace the first time they met. And she was recommended by the president's sister to meet Jacobo. So there was something there,
Yeah.
Pavel, did you happen to ever see if Jacobo met or worked with Terrence McKenna at all with any of the shamanism and
I have asked about this, but I haven't gotten a response yet. But yeah, I've already thought about this because McKenna is one of my favorites, like ever.
yeah.
He's very much like me in terms of uh trying to stay connected with psychonauts and all of that stuff. I went through a phase when I was younger. But yeah, so that's where my investigation is leading me. But let's hope see what happens on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Mr. Wood about something that I spoke to Timothy Alberino about,
Okay.
because he seems kind of angry at these kind of changes in vocabulary and ufology, because he's like he told me the OG ufologists still think that we're dealing with extraterrestrials, and he thinks it's still extraterrestrials. But there's been a lot of books and different theories and hypotheses over the years. Where do you fall on? And then after, I want Anthony's answer on that too, because uh, out of all the theories that you've come across, and even you can talk to me about what your father and Dr. Stanton Friedman thought about this. What do you think it is, like the whole phenomenon? Do you think it's ET, something else, all of the above?
Yeah. Well, a little bit about the vocabulary first, or the etymology, is that, in the beginning it was flying saucers, and then it was unidentified flying objects, UFOBs, and then uh, unidentified lenticular aerodyne technology, like in some of the Majestic documents, and then people call them UFOs and UAPs, being more politically correct, and now they're drones, and so the vocabulary keeps evolving, and I just sort of go with what the most common phrase is, or hyphenate things. So the vocabulary will change, and that's sort of normal. The As to what this is, there's multiple races, multiple agendas, targeting you know different aspects of humanity, and that's the sort of situation. And there's there are non-human intelligences involved. Yeah, in my book, my recent book, UFOs, Who Knows, or are actually AI ufologists. I'm sorry. I answered that question. What's the alien agenda for these different races? And the Greys seem to be, doing sperm and egg and ova stuff, and the Pleiadians and the Nordics are more spiritual, and trying to help humanity along on a path, and the reptilians are sort of in the middle, and there's all these different races um, identified through abductions and abductee interfaces and so forth, that have different focuses. And they care about different things. I think all within the framework of a galactic prime directive, as they would say in Star Trek or something like that. There's certainly man-made UFOs that are flying around, that we developed and designed and implemented, and maybe we did some, you know, um, let's go fly an ET craft around, but I don't think so. Most of it is about us making things. And then there's the real McCoy, the real entities that are flying around on their own missions and agendas. So, yeah, I mean, it is an extraterrestrial presence. Now, you could also say they come from inside the Earth too, which is possible. Um, they could be hanging out on the moon or in other parts of the solar system, or come from different galaxies on this trip over to planet Earth. And I once
the
asked
ocean.
a remote viewer, what's so damn special about planet Earth? I mean, it's got to be like any other, planet on all these millions and billions of stars. And why do they care about this one? And the response was, well, it's somehow strategic. Um, it's like a Midway or Hawaii on planet Earth. It's a high quality spot that is in the right spot to sort of jump jump through the galaxy. So, anyway, a sidebar.
Okay. What about you, Anthony?
So, what was your original question again?
That what do you think we are dealing with? Because there seems to be like since 2017 there was like a change in the whole vocabulary. And as I was saying, that Timothy Alberino was kind of angry at this sudden change of many concepts and so many hypotheses now out. Where do you land in terms of what you've researched?
Yeah, I think for me, it's all of the above. Um, and I think that ultimately, probably mind, consciousness, and physical matter are the same thing. So to me, I think there's real physical craft that's going by what so many people have said. I haven't touched one or seen one myself, but there's enough. I think that that is probably true, given what people are willing to now go under oath and say. I think it's pretty significant at this point for me. So I think there is a physical aspect. I do think that it's plausible that some could be coming from other actual planets, and I think it's plausible they could be coming from other dimensions. I think it's plausible that it could be something we just don't even understand. But I think it's all of these things together, and ultimately, and I do think the consciousness connection to it has been shown, like you guys are talking about with the psi stuff and all of this other stuff we know. So, but I think because the simplicity of it is ultimately that consciousness and matter are the same thing, which is what a lot of the kind of ancient Eastern and other traditions, kind of talk about, and even, psychedelic kind of psychonaut insights, I think, sort of reveal that too.
Okay. And Ryan was talking about us also having some of this type of tech. And
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I see two camps here with this. I see Dr. Stephen Greer talking about that the Tic Tac is Lockheed Martin's, and he's like very certain about that. And then there's the government who's trying to do this control disclosure, saying that no, it's impossible we have that. Commander
Yeah.
Fravor is saying that, and Commander Fravor is someone who I think is believable because of his credentials. So why do you think there's like a disconnect there? What do you think
Well,
is going on?
yeah, I'm reminded of Russian nesting dolls or something where one compartment doesn't know what the other compartment is doing, and this is an example of where a high quality Navy pilot, huge career time, has never encountered the Tic Tac before, and he swears up and down that, hey, this is not our shit. I've been around here forever, but he isn't plugged into a super classified program that's you know inside deeply in the Space Force or something like that. And so that's why there's this dichotomy
Okay.
of what's going on. And as far as man-made gravity control craft, this is something that I've been working on. I'm past crash retrievals. I've okay, there's a bunch of them now. What I'm trying to figure out is, give me all the cases where we can clearly say there's man-made craft um, operating and interfacing. So I think of, you know, um, Lonnie Zamora's case in 64, where um, there wasn't really ETs there, the little small humans, and there's a bunch of evidence to say that it's a man-made, or the case of Eddie Laxton in 1966 in Temple, Oklahoma, where he rounds the bend and sitting in front of him is this teardrop-shaped UFO with a man standing in front of it in an Air Force uniform, and he gets out and walks over to him, and he gets back in the the craft and flies away. Or
Can we spitball a little bit here because
sure,
um, what Jake Barber just said was that what he saw was an egg-shaped white UFO, and that is what they're gonna show on Saturday. And you
Ah,
mentioned Lonnie, and
yeah,
that
that's
was
an egg shape.
shape.
Yeah.
So,
And, and what's interesting about Lonnie's case is that, they have an insignia over the door. What ET is going to put an insignia over the door? And then what ET is going to have telescoping landing gear with holes drilled out to lighten the landing gear? Um,
Yeah.
and what ET would have a small rocket engine that fires off and lifts the craft up a few hundred feet, and then it engages its warp drive or its gravity control and flies off. So there's all this evidence to say that it's man-made in that particular case.
um, I wanted to ask Anthony, because you said you have a background in history. Have you followed Jesse Michaels' work by any chance?
Yeah, I have seen, through the last couple of years, a good handful of his interviews. Yeah.
Because this ties into what we're talking about now. His biggest case, I think, is the Thomas Townsend Brown story. What do you think about that? Do you think there may be some sort of time aspect to these craft? Because Michael Masters wrote that book about the extra tempestrial model. Have you ever pondered that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the time traveling thing I think is definitely possible. I think, there's can be so many different explanations for what people are seeing and experiencing. And I think that one is worth considering. One thing I've picked up in my research was Herman Oberth, or Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, who wrote The Day After Roswell. He did some other interviews and stuff he didn't really talk about necessarily in the book, but he said Herman Oberth told him that, he thought they were time traveling. Maybe Oberth said that himself. I'm not really sure, but that's possible. I mean, I think, to your original question, which was about, Townsend Brown and all that. I read a good amount of a book called, I forget the title of it, but the author's called Paul Laviolette. And I thought he did a very good job of citing where all the information he was getting from about this research into the well, it actually starts in the 40s with Townsend Brown, or even earlier. But then, heats up in the 50s. And then all of these aerospace CEOs are talking about the G engines and gravity, and um, you're going to be flying in silent planes and getting to Europe in an hour and all this, right? And then it does just disappear. But he did a really good job in that book of showing what Townsend Brown was doing and the projects he was working on for the Navy. And so my assessment after that and a lot of other information, the McCandish information and a good amount of other stuff, I find it to be very probable that we have our own UFOs of different varieties from different sources. But
Yeah,
that's just where I stand right now.
yeah. And funny you should mention this, Pavel. Just yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with Paul Shatskin, who wrote the book T. Townsend Brown. Um, and I was giving him a brief on my gravity control investigations. And certainly the primary theories of T.T. Brown of pulsed electrostatic fields creating um, gravity manipulation or so forth um, is is totally believable and probably implemented. Several books have been written about electrogravitics by Thomas Malone, and it's um, uh, it's widely believed that it was implemented on the B-2 bomber to uh, charge the leading edge of the vehicle positively and the trailing edge negatively, and that creates some sort of lift. Um, and when you do the calculations on takeoff gross weight and thrust and fuel load for the engines, you discover that the range is substantially less than what it's stated on Wikipedia. So there's uh, there's some
Wait,
good scientific evidence to say that it has some capabilities that are that are implemented with this sort of technology.
Yeah, it's funny. People keep thinking Wikipedia is a reliable source.
Well, it's
Yeah,
it
It's
has
an
its
intelligence
moments.
asset.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that time manipulation aspect of it, it's one of the things that stays in the back of my mind all the time. Like it could be
Well,
possible.
yeah. Well, I mean, look at all the abduction accounts where, Travis Walton gets abducted and he comes back 4 days later. I mean, clearly he went on an ET craft and it was going someplace and manipulated time. And then there's other cases like that that have, they lose an hour or two or something like that. So uh, clearly, time, if you can change gravity or change the speed of light, you're somehow warping time.
Yeah. The thing is that if that technology has existed since the 50s, what have they been doing with it? That's the big question, right?
No, I think that that's a good question. I think it's the real tragedy is that, they did the entire Apollo space program and spent, I don't know, $300 billion in today's dollars on that space program, and countless number of lives were lost, all for a cover story that we have. We didn't want to expose the fact that we had gravity control, and that's that's the crime against humanity and all those people. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the sad part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Uh, I have a couple more questions before I let you guys go. I want to ask you specifically about the Majestic 12 documents because uh, your father, Dr. Robert Wood, and Dr. Stanton Friedman were the ones that did a lot of work in trying to authenticate those. You worked also on it.
Yep.
Have you managed to like keep track of that group over the decades? And
Oh yeah.
who will
I
be your
mean,
best guest right now that is part of this group?
well, just back up for a second. There's some 3,500 pages spanning 18 years of the Majestic documents. Some are photocopies, some are film, some are original onion skin paper. Um, the they started in 1984, and that was when Stan Friedman got involved and worked on the Eisenhower briefing document. And then in 1994, the Special Operations Manual was leaked, Extraterrestrial Entities, Technology, Recovery, and Disposal. And that is the most stunning, the most credible, the most authentic, in my opinion, based on the most extensive research. There's an entire website dedicated to this, the specialoperationsmanual.com. That goes through all the objections, all the data, and so forth. So that's discussed in detail, as well as you can get the majority of the Majestic documents, or all of them actually, on majesticdocuments.com. But what people don't often realize is that we have original materials and original onion skin paper. Um, and we've done forensics on the pencil and ink and uh, handwritten notes and so forth. So in some cases, we have good provenance. Some cases we have good forensics. Some cases we just have not much. So it sort of depends upon which document. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about who's your best guest right now that is part of that group because
Oh,
as far as I'm
oh,
concerned, it has changed names over the years. I heard Zodiac, I heard other names, but
yeah.
any people that you find could be part of this group right now?
It's a common question, and I have not researched it. Uh, but my ufodex.com tool, I think somebody put that in as a question. Who are the MJ12 people today? And I wrote a response, and I'll find it and forward it to you for fun. But nothing comes off right um, right off the top of my mind right now, um, as to who they are today. Um, in and it was Majestic 12, and then allegedly, as you say, Zodiac. But I think they probably just left it as Majestic 12 or
Yeah.
MJ12.
Okay.
It's like, you know, it's an old boys club that's, they want their history.
I always had this question tied to that group, that initial group, because Banneker Bush was part of them, allegedly.
Yeah.
And is he related to the Bush family, or do they have no
No,
relationship? No?
no, I think it's a different one. And the person that replaced Vannevar Bush was a guy by the name of Eric Walker. And Eric Walker admitted to Grant Cameron, I think on the phone or an email or interview, oh yeah, I know all about MJ12. And hell no, I'm not going to tell you anything about it.
What?
You know? And
Grant has that like beautiful tradition of getting quotes from people that you never expect.
right, exactly. Yeah. So
Who are your best guesses, Anthony, of who might be today, if you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably hypothesize that it's changed and maybe even whatever MJ12 is now is not the only control group. I do think there's evidence that there's different factions, different corporations, different intelligence and armed different branches of the armed forces and however it's all connected. So I think it's probably multiple, but maybe there always has been what was the original MJ12 and still is, but I don't know. I've heard things just like you guys. I've heard, Bobby Ray Inman, who's still alive, interestingly, but he to the day he's denied it, even like a year or two ago. He said there's absolutely nothing to any of it. So that's almost maybe evidence that he is or was part of such a group. So I don't
well,
know. Yeah, we heard like Cheney. Um,
Kissinger,
it'd be a good thing for somebody to kind of commit to try to dig into and see.
right.
Kissinger, you mean the devil? Just
Yeah,
kidding.
right. Yeah, Henry
Yeah.
Kissinger. Yeah, yeah, the
Sure.
devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bushes were apparently right. The Bush um, CIA director and the son, they were plugged
Yeah.
in, I've heard.
Yeah. Which should be interesting to see how it all develops over the next year. Seems to be ramping up. My final question has to do with that. What do you guys expect from all this effort that is going on? Do you think, how do you think disclosure will look like if it happened this year? Let's start with Anthony and then Ryan.
No, no idea, but I do think that's the interview with the new whistleblower and News Nation Saturday night will be pretty telling, I think, for now, for the beginning of what will roll out, and the new administration, presidential administration. So really, it could go so many different ways. I'm going to assume that there will be a resistance from whatever forces are kind of behind keeping secrecy around this. I think that it needs to come out. We need to know what the facts are, and we need to kind of move on from there. And so I'm just hoping, kind of holding that hope that that process goes, and the people who are in positions to really guide this or to kind of do key things like bringing these whistleblowers out, who they are. I mean, we have to assume there's going to be intelligence operations uh, involved. So I think we need to just keep talking about it like this, keep interviewing people, doing journalism. I wish more journalists would cover this. And I think if we do that, we could see a good process. And as long as there's, thoughtfulness, kind of, in my opinion, compassion and just being smart about it. But I'm for letting it all come out personally because I think we need the truth, whatever that is, as much as we can get.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, well, I mean, more journalism. I'll echo that with Anthony. Right, that's all good. The question always boils down to what is disclosure? I mean, when you say disclosure, what is it? Is it the president saying, "Hey, we know that there's ETs in the universe, and we're all God's children, and 90% of all humanity's it's got oh yeah, no big deal." Versus, oh yeah, Roswell's real. We got the alien bodies. We did biological and virological weapons with the ET bodies. We got time travel knocked off, and Furthermore, we can tell you now that all your religious leaders, from Jesus to Muhammad to, John Smith or whatever, are all aliens. Um,
Hybrids.
yeah, they're hybrids, and we have gravity control, and we wasted billions or hundreds of billions of dollars on the Apollo program, and uh, that we can go to the stars and take ET home. Um, and and the entire Middle East oil structure is bullshit, and we can stop that right away. And every car on planet Earth can be electric and free, unlimited range and mileage in 10, 15 years or something. And that sort of disclosure is, oh my God, rewire the corporate economic world and the hell to pay. And that is just massive. Um, and I'll give you the final thought is that, um, I think about, if I'm the ET cabal, so to speak, or the controlling group of aliens, and I see this planet Earth and say, well, what does it take for us to communicate with planet Earth and start diplomatic relations? Well, they got to get rid of their nukes. They got to feed everybody. They got to educate everybody. They got to clean up their environment. And when they do that, check those boxes, I'm all in. And, that's 2050, 2060 in my mind. So that, it's a complicated problem of
Yeah, it's still
when
right
this
now a
stuff.
utopia, if you ask me, but we're moving towards that, I think,
Yeah,
slowly.
yeah,
But I do see more people that are like more awake to being empathetic, which I think is essential for all of this.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, having these conversations is also crucial for trying to understand what is going on. I want to thank you both for your time.
Wait,
Uh,
Pavel, can I ask you what you think? Or what your feel is?
yeah, okay. I I believe that our abilities are way more um frightening to the ETs than we believed. And I think a big part of the secrecy has to do with that they don't want to uncover what we're capable of, really. And that's why it's been suppressed for so long, because if it hadn't been suppressed, you can only imagine how evolved we would be by now. So I think that when we uncover that part of the secrecy, there's a lot of things that are really going to change. And that's why I'm excited about Ross's upcoming report, because he's going to talk about that, the psi
Yeah,
abilities. And I think
Mm,
yeah.
that's
Cool.
essential too. So that's what I think.
yeah.
Before we
Cool.
leave, can you guys tell us where we can find you? And I'm going to ask you to give me all the links so I can put them in the description for where to buy the books, actually, because I also
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to put the other ones. And where can people find you online if they want to get in contact with you? Let's start with Anthony.
Yeah, sure. So my YouTube is Expanded Knowledge with an X, and I share some of my research and stuff there, and sometimes do interviews, which is when I first met Ryan. Um, and then yeah, just our book is on Amazon, UFOs, who knows? And I think it's a unique book because it's all of the quotations of all these people just in one spot. So it's a good tool to have if you're researching, I think, and also if you're just interested in the topic. So
Yeah.
that's me.
So I have a series of websites that you can contact me on those. I have the AI ufologist with artificial intelligence. We didn't talk about this much, but that's on Amazon, and there's a website for that. And then Magic Eyes Only, there's a website for that, and it's on Amazon. Um, and then UFODEX, UFODEX.com is a portal to 600,000 pages of UFO documents and books and periodicals that you can ask any question you want. It's through an AI database that I created.
And what
So
about the Majestic website?
majesticdocuments.com that's where people can read any of the Majestic documents. and download them and look at them, and there's a little commentary about each one and an authenticity rating.
All right. So I want to thank you for a great conversation, and I hope this is not the only one. I hope we can talk again soon. But let's see what happens over the weekend and see if we get some kind of disclosure on Saturday. Thank you guys for your time, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Okay. Have
All
a
right.
great
Thank
rest
you
of
so
your week.
much.
Thanks for having us, Pavel.
Bye, people. Take care.